plan for this class overall, we're going to learn how to make some good sketches and stand-up. Should be fun. We're going to be learning what makes them, make them ourselves, be able to understand a little bit of comedy and television, and be able to try and showcase our skills at the end of this, hopefully, if all turns out right. So for today, we'll introduce ourselves, which we've done. We'll learn the schedule. Really doing good, plowing through this. We're going to look at some standard routines and talking a little bit about what we like them, or if we didn't like them, maybe I have terrible taste. And we're going to be learning what makes good stand-up so that we begin to write our own. What I'm going to be trying to teach in this class is kind of the art of telling a joke in different formats and just generally. So for stand-up and sketch, I'm not going to be trying to define what good comedy is. I'm going to try to define how to make a joke that people laugh at, right? Comedy is subjective, for those of you who don't know the term, which just means that everyone has their own taste. So I'm just going to be teaching you how to use that. Okay, slide. The big thing is when doing comedy, the quote-unquote rule, or is the title for the kind of rule, is punch up and not down. Don't be, trying to make fun of people below you. Try to make fun of people above you who are not very nice, most likely. Anyway.
You can make fun of the president, y'all. Anyone is welcome to do that.
Well, that's a little disrespectful to the presidency.
Okay, Chris. Anyway, so point being, I think that's a really good point. Punching up. So we always punch up. That means, not making fun of people who are marginalized or below or whatever, who don't have as much power in society. And we'll help you figure that out. We'll help you talk through that. If you're ever wondering, like, oh, I wrote this joke, but I'm not really sure, then we'll talk through it, right? And also when people are sharing their jokes. So just like Chris said at the beginning, like, comedy is subjective. People have different opinions about what's funny and what's not. I'm super opinionated. So sometimes I'm a little bit of a jerk about what I think is funny and what's not, but not in this class. In this class, we're going to be supportive of each other. We can give constructive feedback and we can tell someone like, oh man, this joke was really good, but I think it would even be better if you slowed down or if you added more detail about this particular person or thing that was happening or whatever, as opposed to, that wasn't funny, right? As soon as you start doing that, that means that everybody's going to want to not share, right? People are going to shut down. They're going to be self-conscious. And the whole point of this class is to share and practice and mess up and get feedback and then get better. So in order to have that happen, we're going to be supportive of each other.
Yeah, be constructive. Pretty simple, just even if you don't like a joke, just don't go out there and be like, yo, this joke sucks. You can just, you can say how you think it could be better, or you can always, you don't have to be vocal about how you don't like it, because that could be a little mean, but try to be constructive. Look, this lady is really laughing really hard, because that's what you're going to be doing when I show you these stand-ups. So before I kind of tell you some of the main defining rules of stand-up, I kind of want to hear what you guys think makes good stand-up. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about, what kind of jokes we like, why we like those jokes, and a little bit of why we like the way they stand-up comedians perform them. So I'm going to show you a couple examples. So this one's from Brian Ree, and he's a pretty good family comedian. I would recommend him. I listened to this one in the car. Also, this one is funny because it's set to a lot of really granulated images. So enjoy. I'm going to try to, give me a second. I'm sorry.
Chris, maybe, are you pulling up the doc?
Yeah, I'm going to make a little document.
Cool. Okay, sick. I was going to say, I think we should discuss after the clip. We should process like the questions and then go to the next clip. But you already knew that. Never mind.
I know. All right. So while I'm setting this up, the big questions I want to ask are, number one, I hope y'all like that, but what are some jokes that you did or did not like? What are some of the jokes that you thought landed, or what are some jokes that you enjoyed or didn't? I don't know. It's not a particular order. I guess, I don't know. Pretty good kind of impressions. And so the other thing is that the way that joke was written, the little thing on the end is called a button, and a button is we're gonna talk more about form. Actually, I'll save it. I'll save it. I'll zip my lips, as they say in somewhere in school grounds, fighting grounds. Okay, what other jokes do you guys like? I don't want to talk no more.
What were other things you thought were funny? So Natalia liked that part the best. Cordelia did, and Janie too. And I think that's a great example of it's like a fake out joke. You know what I mean? It's like you think it's one thing that's supposed to be funny, and then it turns out to go to the next level of funny because the kid didn't even know that he was how to actually spell it. Right?
Yeah, this is a good example. I'm gonna keep this in mind. I'm gonna use it as an example.
So I like that one too because I feel like I could relate to it, right? Like it's like something that every one of us has like been through, like having to do like a science fair and like sorry, someone started blasting loud Spanish music outside my house for a minute. But like something that you could relate to because you recognize that that's like an experience that probably everyone has had, like trying to scramble to figure out what you're supposed to do with the science fair and like really not, maybe you guys all did really great at the science fair. I never did.
So the cup of dirt.
Yup.
This is this Brian Regan thing. It's a little bit of both, but the main thing that it falls into is that this is an example of an observational stand-up bit, as I like to call it, which is pretty simple. Which is one that you're going to see a lot, which is just observing something weird, and normally it ends up creating relatable content, which is something that Jerry Seinfeld was famous for. And then he became very rich. He gained quite a lot of money, but relatable content is a really big thing. It's very good to make relatable content because then your audience can understand and enjoy it better because they can say, "Oh, I've had that experience."
Mm-hmm. Cool. Who else had one that they wanted to share? Ola said the yellow one is the sun is very funny.
The yellow one is the sun. It's great. Yeah. Let me just trying.
Was there anything else, any other jokes that you guys liked from that? Bobby said whenever he yelled. So that's, I think, getting into the next piece of how he performed it, right? Are you going to ask?
Yeah, so the next part is what did you enjoy about the performance? What did Brian Regan do instead of just flatly saying the jokes? How did Brian Regan make it so that you enjoyed the jokes? What did you notice about his own performance that
Yeah, the energy, the enthusiasm, like, and Joanna just said, oxen, moosin, boxing, him screaming, like getting more and more stressed, more and more like ridiculous and over the top. That's also kind of like how in a comedy routine, sometimes you want to build, you're building suspense, you're building energy, you're building
escalation.
There you go. And
that's something that's also very important in sketch comedy. We'll talk about that more later though, but escalation is very important.
Yep, that you are correct. Anybody else?
You enjoyed.
Exactly. Yeah, and a lot of the comedians that you guys mentioned at the beginning being your faves, I mean, like Jim Carrey is another example of that, right? Like he uses his entire face to make people laugh. It's not just about the jokes. It's about the whole face or the body language or the way their voice sounds. Yeah.
All right, so I think that should be all. Originally, I was going to ask about delivery, but I think we kind of talked about delivery when talking about performance.
I was just going to ask, did anyone like not like it or think that parts of it were not funny? What would you improve?
Oh yeah, did anyone have any qualms? Did anyone not enjoy it? Were there any negatives?
It's hard. I'm going to tell you guys, me and Chris spent a lot of time trying to find clean stand-up routines that were in any way appropriate. So
yeah, so I mean,
I think
when we were talking,
a really good job.
Thanks.
Just about naming like family comedians. Even then, a lot of the comedians you mentioned weren't absolutely clean, and it's just because it's so difficult. Because a lot of the times, I feel like when a comedian gets focused on doing a family content kind of thing, they think I have to make this just for children. Right? There can't be a family thing. They don't realize they can just kind of cut out cuss words. They really got to go into the children. But I think Brian Regan is a good example of a guy who realized that he's a good performer for all the family. Because I think even the CIT, I'm still laughing, but I used to watch him when I was a kid. He's really good. I got to see him live one time too.
Yeah, a lot of adults like underestimate young people's ability to understand complicated humor, or like just a, humor. It's not like adult or youth humor, but there is kind of like that expectation that like, oh, it has to be like poop and fart jokes. And also poop and fart jokes are funny. Like adults still find those
Well,
funny.
you still gotta, yeah, but you still gotta do them well. You're gonna see in the next one, you're gonna watch a good example of poop and fart jokes. No spoiler alert, but maybe I put them in there. Who knows? Don't. It's good. It's good this time. I put this. He's okay. The next one is Jim Gaffigan. This guy's really great. He does mostly family stuff. And he's a fun guy. I also saw him in concert.
Yeah, totally. So having like the repetitive thing that you come back to it's another example of escalation too, because like each time it gets more silly and more ridiculous, and you're switching it up. So it's not just like telling a joke, it's singing this like almost like a chorus, you know?
Yeah, we're not
Um,
going to talk about them that much, but that's like a mini example of a callback, which normally happens in in longer comedy shows where they reference one joke for another. If you've seen John Mulaney, he did one thing where I think
Now you're
maybe I'm
good.
on the verge. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, but John Mulaney had a joke in one of his specials where he was talking about how his mom thought that she saw a ghost. And then he made a joke later on in the show about how his mom bought him t-shirts that were too big for him. And he was making a joke saying, yeah, maybe I was the ghost. Maybe I was dressed in your huge shirts and you thought I was a spirit. So that's an example of a callback, and it's like a mini callback and a thing. It works well. So I'll do a little hot.
Yeah, people. I think one of the things about the callback too is that people pick up on the patterns. So like when there's a pattern to the joke, it gives people a cue, like a reminder that it's funny. You know what I mean? It's like, oh wait, this is the funny part that was funny before, and now it's funny again. So it reminds people to laugh, which is good.
We'll talk more about that, which is the kind of punctuation between jokes. The little Hot Pocket jingle makes it clear when the kind of difference between the jokes is. And we're going to talk more about that and why it's important later on.
Joanna, that was great. That was great. Anyone else? Who else had a favorite part? A Pop-Tart full of nasty meat is what Joanna said, and I thought that was absolutely hysterical.
Did anyone have any, just quickly moving on, did anyone have any jokes of the thing that they didn't like? Before we I'm sorry, there was a giant thud in the ceiling.
The breakfast pocket, Ray used, was that one that you thought was funny or you didn't like that part? Oh, you liked it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, okay. So our breakfast pocket. So were there any actual jokes people didn't like, or did people think they were just jokes that might have not landed, or do you think it was all perfect because Jim Gaffigan is great? All right, I'm gonna move on. Performance. We already took kind of two things of these little callbacks that he added in, which I think add to kind of the performance element. I added the singing part because we kind of mentioned that, which is that the kind of singing made it a little funnier. Was there anything else of his performance that you guys enjoyed?
Mushrooms are awesome part 2, aka Tato just said hot pocket was his favorite part.
The hot pocket was really good. So the hot pocket. Did anyone like how he was able to link to a small joke about toilet paper purchasing? I think it's interesting that he quickly transitioned to that before going back. I think it's good to add a little extra beat. So I'm gonna put that in performance, which is extra beat. Anything else?
Cool.
One thing that Jim Gaffigan does that I just want to mention, he didn't do it much in that thing. I forget. I think he made a joke about it when he was saying that I like NASCAR, which is he does this little kind of mini voice of like this kind of whisper, and it's kind of like a little editorializing thing of like voicing the audience, and I think it's pretty neat. I think it's, technically it's punching down on the audience. It's okay. Anyway, doesn't matter. I just thought that was a funny thing, and that's one of the things that he does in most of his shows. Here's a slideshow.
It's almost like a Karen, like he's channeling like a very basic American or something like that. And he's like trying to
Yeah.
know about that,
So yeah. So the next bit that we're gonna watch is from this girl named Aparna Nancherla. She's in a couple things. She's a little darker. So if you like dark humor, I'd recommend her. For now, the other thing that Apollo Nanchura does that needs a little introduction is that sometimes she does slideshows. That's something special that she does. That's a little different, and so we're going to show you one of her little slideshow bits.
Yelp 1-star reviews, they seem negative, but I always find them like a very untapped source of literature.
You're right. I got to skip forward a little bit. So
I think you can. Oh no.
No.
It was
We
pretty
can go back for things that we didn't like about it as much, but I think I'm sorry I was a little short, but here, wait, I think I misspelled her name.
Here, you work on that. I'll call in some people who's got some things they want to say about this part. Lincoln, can you use the chat? Or you can try to say it, but you might need to use the chat. I like Doug. I like the Doug joke. Right. So just something so absurd, right? The Doug joke. Everyone liked that part where she was saying, "Who's Doug?" Right? Because it was a comment on her wall.
Was there anything about her performance we liked? I think that was where most of the good stuff might have been. Facial expression. So her and Jim Gaffigan had pretty good facial expressions.
Yeah,
We couldn't see them for Brian Regan just because he was in granulated images.
Bobby mentioned that she's almost kind of monotone. So it's kind of like an interesting, like almost like an opposite of Brian Regan, where like her whole delivery is like being kind of like very like suspicious, almost like kind of sarcastic, but not like super high energy, but still very funny. Like almost a deadpan delivery where she's like really calm and like really serious, even when she's saying things that are very funny. And that can be a really, really, really effective way to do comedy, is to say ridiculous things and then be like completely straight-faced when you do it. So that is a really a good point.
Was there anything else you liked about her performance? I was going to point out, I think the slideshow is a neat thing. It's fun, you know. It's neat to be able to do commentary in a comedy format separate from just observational humor. So,
Cool.
Anyone else?
I can't tell if you're raising your hand, Ola. If you are, go ahead. No, okay, cool. Cool.
Was there anything we didn't like about Aparna Nancherla? So far, we've enjoyed all of them, but I'm not sure if, just in case there was anything, you know. Okay.
Natalia's asking what that performance was called.
That was so that performance, I think, was just called Yelp reviews. I forget. If you look up Aparna Nancherla and you look at her Netflix thing, I didn't show all of it. There's 2 other jokes that are not as clean but are really funny. So, anyway, that's also from her show. She was on the show called The Stand-Ups on Netflix. So, if you guys liked her, she has a whole episode.
Makes sense. Yeah. Some of the stuff, like, it was a little bit advanced, like, or like, you know, older vocabulary or whatever, like an introspective troll or whatever, that part. She had a lot of words pretty quickly. She delivered them pretty quickly too. So it might have been hard to like get it right away. And usually you do want your audience to try to get the joke right away. So that's an important point.
Yeah, she has some very good observational humor. For people who want cleaner comedians, Brian Regan and Jim Gaffigan, really good. Aparna Nancherla is much more darker comedy if you're into that stuff. She did a bit on anxiety that's kind of funny. Okay, moving on. This slide doesn't have a stock image, so it's a really sad slide. I guess you're just going to have to be blank just like this slide because there's not anyone directing you to tell you how to feel. Okay, how to tell a joke, but it's the answer this time. I'm gonna tell you kind of what the kind of big secrets behind stand-up are. We touched on some good things, and so these are kind of the real. Oh no, these are kind of the more basic stuff. So there are multiple things that make good stand-up, but it really boils down to one central concept, and that's called setup punchline. And I know what you're thinking. That's a joke, Chris. I know, but basically, setup punchline is useful because you always kind of want a balance. You want to have like do I have terrible lighting? Okay.
No,
Oh
you're
no, I
good.
don't. I do. It gets darker in light. It doesn't. Okay. But sometimes you want to make sure you have. Well, no, you always want to have set up punchline because you want to make sure that your audience knows when to laugh. And the way that set up punchline works is normally about one sentence of a setup, right? So let's take for example, Jim Gaffigan. Let's say he did the joke of Hot Pockets actually has Oh no, okay. So let's say the setup was I never feel good after eating a hot pocket. The punchline was there was multiple. But the main punchline was then he went into how he feels after eating a hot pocket, and that's where most of the jokes lied in. Did I rub it all in my face? My back hurts. So that's the setup punchline. The other thing about setup punchline is sometimes if you let's take for example that Brian Regan joke that we all liked, the cat spelled Katt. I know there's two T's. So that joke is that's called a button, which is the setup was right. There's kids who sometimes were so bad and they just decided to get the answer wrong on purpose because they wanted to get out and they didn't want to do it right. The punchline was cat Katt. Okay, the button was then he came back and then he goes, I know there's two T's, and that's the button. That's another joke that you weren't expecting. So always want to get in the setup punchline. It's the most important thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about with the performance arts next week, because next week I'm going to try to have hopefully all, at least some of you, this is a pretty big group of you guys sharing out some of your stand-ups that you've written. So the point of setup punchline, as I mentioned before, is so that the audience knows when to laugh. Sometimes it's hard when you go on, right, with a setup, and then you add your punchline. And even if the punchline's funny, people might not understand it because there was so much setup. They may think it's more setup, right? So you always want to keep it kind of punctual and organized and balanced so that people understand when the joke is coming. Here's an example I wrote. This is from another guy who's a comedian here in Boston. Forgot his name. But I didn't write this joke. And as I saw a really mean sign when I was driving the other day, it said, no, U-turn. And the joke is, I don't know if you guys got it, but it's, you know the signs that say no U-turn? And so the joke was he interpreted it like it was saying, no, U-turn. Instead of U-turn is the term. It doesn't matter. Next slide. So I think, here we go. How do I write stand-up? And as you can see, your faces are going to be like this. You're going to be very confused, itching your head, and you're not going to have a body anymore. And you're gonna turn yellow. No! Sorry, I skipped a slide and I made me angry. Okay. Now, okay. So now you know how to write the stand-up punchline. It's time to try to write some material. The way I like to think about it is there are two kinds of forms of comedy, and both are going to kind of have the same way that you're going to write them. Normally, what you want to do is come up with a premise, whether it be a story or an observation, and then put in your setup punchline, right? So what you're going to be doing is writing it out. So let's say, for example, we're doing a story thing. What you're going to want to do is write out a story, okay? You're not going to want to try to focus on jokes, but you want to have a nice, fun premise or a story that you enjoy.
Or another way of thinking about it is like a theme, right? So like having the theme of school, or like the theme of like summer camp, for example. There's like a lot of different jokes that you could tell about.
Yeah, you can say summer camp stories. So for now, with a story, basically you're going to tell one central thing. So for example, I've written a stand-up and it was about my trip to Ripley's Believe It or Not and New York, right? But originally it was just about Ripley's Believe It or Not. What I did was I wrote the whole thing, and it wasn't that funny because I didn't try to put in any punchlines. I just tried to write down the story, no focus on jokes, just plain old story. And then what I did was I took the things and I turned every sentence that was not a joke, that was a setup, and I added a punchline. So that now it's a whole stand-up and there's plenty of jokes in there. Okay? So that's one way you can do a story. Observation is a little different. So with the story, the harder part is normally putting in the actual jokes, because you have to try to come up with every setup needs a punchline, which can be difficult, right? Sometimes you don't really know a punchline, but you know, just sometimes you don't want to put something in there, come back to it later. Observation. With observational humor, it's a little bit more difficult from a premise point, but not a, joke standpoint. Putting in the jokes is easy, coming up with a premise is a little bit more difficult. Normally when I already have a premise in mind. So say, for example, I've written a stand-up, and the premise was rest stops, right? Right on the road, rest stops. So I wrote a bunch of jokes. Well, no, I didn't. I wrote the things that I observed at rest stops. You know what's weird? They always have massage chairs. Why? You know what's weird? Actually, I forget there's always an Auntie Anne's pretzels, okay? And then what I did was I put in the jokes. I added the punchlines, right? For the massage chair one, I always go to a rest stop, there's massage chairs. I don't understand it because for some reason, you would think that once you're done with a road trip and you were just driving and you got off the road, you say, I need to take a break, stretch my legs. First thing you do when you walk into a rest stop, you see one of those massage chairs, you go, oh my God. The first thing I need right now is to sit in a more comfortable chair that punches me in the spine. Okay, so there's the joke. That's the setup punchline. Okay, I can show you the way, as they say. I can show you the way in Disney. Okay, I gotta find.
I think it's the world, but you're close.
I can show you the something. I can show you my stand-up bit if I pull it up. Well, anyway, here I pulled up. This is my Ripley's Believe It or Not stand-up. It's kind of split into two parts. I did a kind of bit on New York and a bit on Ripley's Believe It or Not. This is the whole thing. I'm not going to go through all of it just because we've already watched a lot of stand-up, maybe some other time. But for now, we're going to look at some of the jokes, and I'm going to dissect them real quick just to show you. So, for example, I'm going to highlight things. This is going to be yellow. So, now a while back, me and my family actually went to New York. Okay, that's a setup, right? So, that's not that funny on its own. Obviously, it's not at all funny. But right here, move it. Okay, right here, I had a comment I said, before it became the set for the next season of The Walking Dead. And that's a virus joke. It's real funny. That's a punchline. Even if you didn't get, even if it wasn't that great, it's a punchline. And visited Ripley's Believe It or Not. Here's another setup. What's he gonna say? What's funny man gonna say? And believe it or not, people will do a lot to be not very famous. And right there,
That's
green, another punchline. Here, wait, let me see. Do I have any story things? So the other thing is in the before time, so you can recall. So right here, that's a little bit of a joke, but not really. So this is all set up. The other thing is in the before times, if you can recall, there were these like grown mobs, these hordes, these murders of grown men in Halloween costumes just flooding the streets. Okay, so right there, that's a joke. Okay, standing around. So children's Halloween costumes. I added the kind of murder joke. It should be over here, but it's not because this is the script, and I added that joke later on. I didn't feel like editing the script. And this is a button right here, standing for your viewing standing there, just for your viewing pleasure and also money. Okay, ready? That was a little bit of a button. Not really, but it's a little bit of a button. I'll make it orange because that's cool. So that's a couple examples. Obviously, my stand-up is really good. Now I know you say, "Oh, Chris, please tell us more some other time." For now,
no, I was gonna say, please tell us more. I would love it if you would actually perform your stand-up set for us.
Do you want me to do that now, or should I do it next week?
Well, because we only have 8 minutes left, so I figure we might as well end with that, and then we're going to ask everybody between this week and next week to work on some observations, some stories, and working out some jokes, and that we can, we'll be able to share and then critique next week.
Yeah, so, here we go. Let me just...
Oh, wait, this slide is important. Never mind. You should do this.
Okay, so try yourself. Feel free to do as you like, but the order I normally do things in, as I described before, is I like to brainstorm, think of things that I've seen or done recently that I could talk about, something fun, but with some meat on it that can kind of make a routine. I don't want something too short. For example, there's a story I have that's one time I ate Chick-fil-A and I threw right up in a cup, and then the waiter asked if I was enjoying my meal. And it was funny, but it wasn't that funny when I describe it. But there's not much to go off there, all right? That's a pretty dead-end story. One sentence did it. So you want to try to think of something that's fun, but also has a little bit of story in it. You don't just want it to kind of fall flat. So you should list them out. And normally I like to think of the one that I'm excited about or the one that I think has the most comedic potential. So, kind of brainstorm, write a little list, and then select one or maybe even two that you think are good, and then try to write about. So then write them down, okay? Write them down without the jokes in mind. Don't think about making them funny. Just write them down for now. And then add punchlines to the setup. Obviously, once you do your stand-up is not going to be done, right? Quote unquote done. It's going to be finished, but it still needs editing. And if you can't come up with a punchline to all the setups, that's why we're here. And next week, I plan to hopefully help you more with some editing and some different things you can do while performing that are important. So we're going to give you a little bit of time to work on it. Maybe if anyone's, probably no one's going to be done by the end of the class, but next week we're going to try to do some sharing out as a group. So obviously if there are any setups you couldn't complete or your routine feels a little short, me or you can also ask Heather or Jay, but you're probably gonna want to ask me because I'm the cool kid, and the best and the greatest of all time. I am the GOAT. Whoopsies. Anyway, but you can always ask one of us, and we will try to help you. So the kind of ideal routine, it's not like ideal. It doesn't really matter. Everyone's a little different, but the way that I like to think about it is kind of having about 3 to 5 minutes worth of stuff when you read it out, and a couple different beats or jokes to think about. You don't need to just have 3 to 5 minutes. If you have less, that's also fine. We're going to work on that more with performance arts, or with the performance kind of part. You also want to have a couple different beats, kind of, not always, but you're going to want to have different things that you kind of talk about, right? So say, for example, that Brian Regan bit, right? It was one thing, and it was called Stupid in School, and it overall made one whole routine, but there were some different bits that he hit on, right? He did spelling bee. He did, plurals, the whole boxing part. And then he also did some science fair stuff. He did different things while being under the same kind of umbrella category. That's kind of when he went with a little routine when you talk about it. Even Jim Gaffigan, kind of, he did that little bit about toilet paper. And he also had, like, jokes about how Hot Pockets made him feel before I did jokes about funny poo-poo. Funny. Anyway, so, yeah. We got into some examples, and now what we're kind of going to have you do is try to write some yourself. And next week, I think we're going to share them out a little bit, go through some of the, I keep saying next week, but yeah, well, it is next week, but I keep referring to it. But yeah, so next week we're going to be doing some sharing out. It's okay if you don't feel comfortable, but we're going to try to have most people, we're going to try everyone, but there's a lot of people here, to share out and, do some editing stuff. And so, yeah, for next week, you can try and have something written down, hopefully. And, yeah, I think it'll be fun. That's kind of where we're ending off.
We're going to have you guys do, because we only have about 10 minutes left today, which is wild. But with whatever time you have in the rest of today, but also over the next week, what you should start doing is writing down, at the very least, starting to brainstorm some observations, like funny, weird things that you've noticed, like the massage chair thing, right? Or just things that you think you could expand on a little bit more. So write down some observations about the world, about people, about places, whatever. And also write down some funny stories. So just like when I started today with my mushroom story, I could go back to that story and I could add more points to it. I could add more punchlines to it. But I have a really good place to start with that story. So that's what you guys want to be thinking about, and why we're kind of giving you this this framework is that we're going to ask you between this week and next week to start writing down observations, writing down stories, and also starting to create jokes. and adding jokes into that so that you can share them next week.